if we do not have that in our lives, then what's the purpose of living? Just going to work every day and whatever. You could be in a factory, and that's no disparagement on factory workers, right? So you're just doing something very automatically, but we naturally want to be expressive beings. We want to express ourselves, and so the arts are a means to do that. And whatever that medium is, and that could be.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney Ann Jenkins. Hello, and welcome to the 110th episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This episode, I have with me Jared Redick. Jared is a third-generation ballet dancer and has spent over 2 decades as a soloist with world-class companies like Boston Ballet and Miami City Ballet. He's now the assistant dean and professor at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, and he directs productions, leads diversity initiatives, and mentors the next generation. His expertise spans from classical and contemporary repertoire to arts administration and innovative education, making him an engaging guest on topics of artistry, leadership, and innovation. I really enjoyed this conversation with Jared. We covered a lot of topics over ranging art and discipline and craft and the process of dance, ballet dance in particular, over professional and academic spectrums. Jared shared his wisdom and he has a lot of insight into the dance world, which really is a reflection also of our everyday lives. So enjoy. So you're in North Carolina?
I am. And where are you located?
I am in Nashville.
Oh, I love Nashville. I have been there many times. I've worked with the ballet there, of Nashville
Okay.
Ballet. It's a great town.
Yes.
I'm ready when you are.
So, the topic of my podcast is about following your inner voice or your authenticity or the duende or the daimon or whatever that thing is within you that drives you. And as a creative, I think that must have arisen in you at some point to be able to follow it to get to where you are now, and also to be able to lead people in an artistic way to recognize that within themselves. And so, one of the first things that I like to ask is, when is the first time that you realized that you had this inner voice of your own and that you were able to recognize it and follow it?
Well, I think for me, as a former professional ballet dancer, and now a teaching artist, I think I go back to about the middle of my career. When I was about the middle of my performing career, sometime in my mid-20s, mid to late 20s, and I started getting more substantial roles and progressed through my career at a certain point. And so you think about, how do I really invest myself deeply into the artistic approach of what I'm doing versus just the mechanics of being the athletic part of it, right? The mechanics of just executing the steps and going through. Someone teaches you what you're supposed to do, and then you follow it. And then you're given these bigger roles and you start thinking, okay, how do I want to interpret and bring my own authentic self to that moment in time? And I think somewhere about probably my mid 20s is when this was happening. And that has just evolved, and there's been layers added to this. Obviously, you're talking about life experience and all the other things that happen in real life or your other lives that inform what you're doing in your professional life.
Right, absolutely. So, would you mind if we went back to little Jared a little bit when you were growing up and how you even came upon dance in the first place?
So I'm a third generation ballet dancer. My grandmother was a prima ballerina in the Hungarian National Ballet. And then she defected from Hungary with my mother in 1956. They came to the United States. They opened ballet school. And then my grandmother taught, my mother taught. And that's how I ended up in the ballet studio with my older brother, Darren, who's 3 years older than I. So that's what really brought me to the arts, to ballet specifically. Um, and it's been a ride, and I continue now. I do what my parents did for, or what my mother did for me, which is pass on my information to the next generation of young artists.
Yeah. Was it a choice for you to participate, or were you kind of like thrown in there?
I think there's a bit of both. I think younger me, you were just along for the ride. My mom's a teacher. I'm in the studio. I take ballet classes. That's what I do. I also was a soccer player during in my teenage years. And then there became a point at the end of high school when I was probably, well, how old was I? 15, 16. And then I went away to school, and that was my choice. And then I started making my own decisions about this is something that I want to pursue. I have an aptitude for it. Lots of things, lots of positive feedback came my way because of it. And so I think the path and myself, we chose each other in that way.
Mhm. And being a male in the ballet world, how did you find your place there?
Yeah, I mean that is a question. It was very challenging for me as a young man, as a teenager. Um, Lots of bullying, lots of those kinds of interactions. And then when I went away to school, those stopped, and then I really was able to pursue it and matured. So I really did have I had conflict with myself during that time. And it's like, is this something I pursue? Do I keep doing it? Lots of pressure to not continue. Um, and that was a struggle. And then obviously once I went away and turned professional, that really wasn't an issue any longer.
Where did you go to school?
So I went to school at University of North Carolina School of the Arts, where I
Okay.
am currently the assistant dean of dance in my department. So they have a high school and a college program. I went away for my 10th grade year, for my sophomore year in high school, and so that's really where the big shift occurred.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So 10th grade.
Yeah,
And then would you like return to your hometown like during the school year to,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, with my breaks, I'd go home. I'd go home during the breaks and over the summers. But
Yeah.
most of the time, I lived here in where I am right now, which is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Yeah. And where was home for you? Like where did you grow up?
I grew up in Reston, Virginia, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. If you've ever flown into Dulles Airport, it's about 5 minutes away.
Okay. Excellent. Can you describe what it felt like to go to where you are now, for the first time in an academic setting versus growing up with your family?
Are you talking when I was younger? When I
Yeah.
was, yeah. So I really did feel like I found a new home being here, being around a lot of other male-bodied dancers, and just being in an artistic community. Like this school is a conservatory, and we have the five art schools. So there's actors and dancers and musicians and people who work behind the scenes, like stage managers and lighting designers. So being in that environment really felt like more of like it felt like home. It felt like my artistic home when I came to school here.
Yeah. And so you had mentors, who were also male, perhaps, to
Mhm.
kind of guide you your way.
I did. I did. Ballet is really dominated by female dancers and teachers. So a lot of my mentors were female, but I did find male mentors here as well,
Yeah.
which was really helpful.
So when you're dancing, do you find that you are enhancing an aspect of yourself, or do you step into like a separate character? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think, you when you start talking about performing in particular, I'll talk about performing, or you get into that flow state when you're on stage. And you find that even though you might be stepping into a character, you do find authentic self in that moment because there's no other noise in your head. All it is the music and the stage and the steps that you're doing and then finding the authenticity of your way through the movement. So I mean, it's really freeing because you're really it's one of the few times you're in life I find that you're just in the moment, you know, when you get into that flow state and there's no self-doubt, there's no anxiety, there's just what's happening right now.
Yeah, I think like an important point to mention is like to get to that flow state, especially in a skill like ballet, which takes a lot of training and concentration. It's important to have those things in place so that you can get to the flow state.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to have all the preparation in beforehand in place.
All the techniques
Yeah.
to enable you to get to that place so it can be like an automatic drive so you don't have to think about it so much.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about hours and hours and hours of preparation, right? I'm very much I try to impart to my students how important and dancers, not just students, but you know, other professional dancers that I work with, that it's all about the process. It is the arts are such a process-driven endeavor. So the more we invest in that process, the less we have to think about it, we can execute at our best, our optimal situation, which is what we always want to do in life. And so that is very much a translatable skill. Like the dancers who, you know, that maybe they retire or they move on to a different pursuit. If they bring those life skills to that pursuit, they'll be in a great situation because they understand that. You just go through the process, you trust in it, you do all the preparation, and then you can execute and perform at your best.
Yeah. Would you mind talking a little bit about discipline and how that
Yeah.
fits in?
I think discipline is something that's so critically important to just the human experience with whatever you're doing in your life, right? If we have to work, and we do have to work to live or pursue whatever it is, there has to be a discipline into whatever it is you're pursuing. You know, the students have to, any professional athlete, for instance, this is an easy one. You know, you have to go and you have to do your workouts every single day. You have to follow your regiment of what it is in order for you to succeed. So that takes discipline. And those days when we really don't feel like doing whatever it is, fill in the blank, you know, that's where your discipline really kicks in. And it really is there to undergird and support everything that we're trying to achieve, right? We set our own personal goals, and then we want to make sure that we can execute those goals and achieve those goals.
Right. And dance is such an interesting craft because there is an athleticism that's required, but
Mhm.
also it's an art form. Uh,
Yes.
would you mind like talking about like the bridge of those two things?
Yeah, and that there is a big intersection between those two things. You know, I always like to say we're not competitive athletes, we're artists. And so, but undergirding everything is the athletic part of it, right? You have to hone your craft, right? Which means really honing how you approach dancing and movement, which is your body. So every day we have to craft our body to be able to execute and achieve all these amazing things artistically. And once we've really honed our technique, then the artistry really can sing through our bodies. And that's ultimately where we want to get it to. So you have to have, you know, it's just like playing an instrument as well. You have to have the technique under there, and then you can make your own interpretation of whatever notes you're playing. So we do that with our bodies. So it's not, you know, especially our younger students, younger dancers, let me just say younger dancers, is not going to magically occur on stage. You're not going to be able to really perform at your highest level. And for it to translate to the audience, without having done the work beforehand. It's there's no magic formula there. It just takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But it's you know you have to find how do you enjoy the process, which is a love-hate relationship for sure. But I found a lot of comfort in it. I found a lot of security in it. I found a lot of freedom within the process.
Yes. And the rehearsal process
Mhm.
is much different than a performance
Mhm.
energy wise. What do you feel is most important in a rehearsal process to prepare yourself for a performance?
Well, the rehearsal process is always interesting, right? Because you're talking about dance and ballet. They're such human art forms. You are up close and personal with your peers. You're up close and personal with the person who's working with you, a rehearsal director or a choreographer or someone who comes to teach you the ballet, a stager. So in the rehearsal process, it's so important to come to that situation with as an open mind and a sharp mind, a rested mind, a fed body, and so that you can be right there with the person because it's going to be physically, challenging. So I think we have to be able to do that. And also for dancers, you have to be good at taking direction. And so I think when you start talking about taking direction and being coached and being taught something, you have to build up a rapport with that person. So there's really good communication there. And when you have good communication, the trust comes in, and now you have a really positive environment for everything to flourish.
Yes. There's so many places that I want to go from here. So give me one moment.
Absolutely. Take your time.
Because you're in the academic world and you've also been in the professional world,
Mhm.
there comes a moment where like I feel like people rely on classes too much or they're really comfortable in that class environment and like the time to take those skills out into the world.
Mhm.
And how that like those boundaries are no longer there and you have to find your own way.
Mhm.
What was your experience with that?
Well, I mean, the difference between the rehearsal process being in the studio versus performing, right? I think is that the gist of your question?
Yeah.
So I think we have to do all that preparation in the rehearsal process to be able to take the leap to go on stage and to just trust in all of the preparation that you've done so that the artistic can come forward. And that means that could mean for any field.
So I have an acting background.
Mhm.
And so I've noticed like throughout the years there are certain things that I didn't have when I was in my training that are now being implemented, such as like an intimacy coordinator.
Mhm.
And that seems like in dance, intimacy is something that emerges quite often, especially like in the big ballet productions, because there are essentially characters that you're acting out. Have you found that that is becoming something more implemented in the dance world as well? An awareness of the boundaries of personal intimacy versus character intimacy?
Yeah, and that is something that is newly being adopted in the ballet world in particular. I can't speak to the broader dance world, but I think film has been doing it for forever. Actors have been doing it. They've had intimacy coordinators there to help them through that. And we actually here where I teach, we work with an intimacy coordinator as well because as you know, when you're dancing with another person, I mean, it's body to body, and you're really one person's manipulating another person. So there has to be a level of respect and trust, and there have to be really clear boundaries about what's okay and what's not. And if you're acting out, let's say you're in Romeo and Juliet, if there's any kind of love scene or any kind of kiss or any kind of physical contact, really, which you can't do if you're dancing with someone, you can't really do it effectively if you're not having that personal connection, that touch. There has to be clear boundaries about how do you approach all of those instances and how do both people feel safe and understand what the expectation is. And if you're playing again, if you're playing that character, you had your rehearsal, you did everything fully. If there was touches in a more intimate way, those need to stay in the studio or on the stage. Those don't continue once you exit those situations, right? It's not a carry through. Whether
Uh,
that is something that is consensual later on, that's a thing, but it can't be assumed that just because things are happening in the studio or on the stage, that those continue forward.
Yes, the showmance, which is basically what my whole dissertation study is about right now. So, so in a conservatory environment, there's a lot of attention paid to how to get into the character or
Mhm.
like train for the role or rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. In part of your program or your classes or your approach, do you teach your students to detach from that, to de-roll and to debrief and separate themselves from that experience? Is that part of the process that is being implemented now?
We actually do that. I teach something called partnering, a partnering class, which is male-bodied and female-bodied dancers learning the skills of dancing with each other, right? The girls, female-bodied dancers dancing on point, male-bodied dancers manipulating them, doing turns and lifts and all of these things. We have a lot of discussion, usually at the beginning of every class and the end of every class, about, we're going to do this, check in with your partner, make sure you have really clear boundaries about how it is we're coming into the space. And then at the end of class, we certainly want to leave all of that behind. So that actually, just in the class itself, before we even rehearse anything, there's already a culture of understanding boundaries and what that means when you're working with another person, and that's respect that needs to be there, and that good communication as well. So that kind of has been happening organically since we've been working with an intimacy coordinator. There's more, I should say, there's more specific and intentional communication around that. Not that it didn't exist previously, but now that we're actually calling it out and really, identifying the important things to make everyone feel as safe as possible in the studio. That's become part of our culture now. So that is a work in progress. I know the whole dance world is at varying levels of implementing it. So we'll see how that actually unfolds in the years to come.
Yeah, because it seems like artistically and creatively, it's like the more boundaries and safety and anchoring that you have in place, the more flow that you're able to have and spontaneous moments and surprises in performance.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think again, you're talking about building up a really an environment where everyone has a great degree of comfort, and there's trust involved there, and there's good communication. So then you can explore more deeply. It's because we don't know what each person's going through on a day-to-day basis. We're not even talking about things that might have happened in the past or things that they're dealing with currently. So I think that that's the best we can do to really respect our fellow artists in that space, is to have that communication and be really present in the moment.
So I want to get back to you for a minute, because you went from being a student where you are to now being more of a head of a program director. How did that happen?
I was very fortunate that I've been teaching throughout my performing career. I kind of separate them from being a student and performing career and now being a teaching artist. That toward the end of my performing career, I was asked to teach more and more various places, and at the very end, I was asked to run a school. So I was dancing full time, and then I was also running a school. So I had a great transition as I was getting, basically aging out, right? The body only will can take that level of physical activity for so long, just like a professional athlete. So I was transitioned. I was given the opportunity to run a school, and I pursued that and ended up ultimately making the decision to retire and continue on in that way. I was still teaching, but I was running the school. And then that opportunity turned into another opportunity of running another school, which brought me here ultimately to UNCSA. So those just kind of built one onto the next thing.
What have you learned about yourself from going through that process as a dancer?
Yeah, I think this is something that I really have a lot of positive feelings towards when we're talking about this progression. I am very much a person that feels that we have to have a progression in life, and that goes towards if we think about it professionally. right? If you join a company, whatever company that might be, you have to be able to continue to grow within that company, but also move your way up through it to have more and more responsibility, more and more opportunities. And I think that that is one thing that I've really learned about. That is what makes people feel valued. It makes them feel supported. It also makes, because they're growing and they're able to change, and we're not stagnant in our lives, right? We're there. So many things are happening and informing our worldview every day that, you want to have your life continue to evolve. And hopefully we have some degree of control over that evolution professionally. I mean, personally, we certainly have a great deal of control over, but professionally, it's very easy to get stuck in a career. I'm in a place, you get frustrated, things go a direction you don't want them to go. But I like to think about, how do I help now when I'm working with dancers? How do I help them progress? What is that progression? Is it better than yesterday? Is it looking at what they're pursuing, or maybe it's a role that they're trying to get their head around? How do I help them find new areas that they can explore so that they feel that they are growing, and they should be growing in whatever direction that they want. So I really have a great appreciation for the idea of progression in your life in all areas.
Absolutely. And since you are in an academic setting and there are classes and there are grades, how do you personally combine an artistic craft with the grade structure? Like, what
Yeah.
is that based upon?
We talk a lot about that. We definitely talk a lot about that as a faculty here. And we all have our own academic freedom to pursue it however we wish. But my personal philosophy about that is, if I have dancers in my class, I really look at the grading is, are they present? We look at attendance. Are they there every day? And how are they growing on a daily basis throughout the semester? And if they have really engaged with the material and shown growth, then they will get a really good grade in my class, whatever it is. And when you talk about that growth, I don't look at it from a class standpoint of, this person equals that person, this person grew this much, and this person grew this much. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, what do I, knowing this dancer, what do I think, what do I perceive to be their capacity? And so if they only grew a little bit in comparison to their peers, but for them that was really invested work, it doesn't matter to me. So it's not a thing of, this person can do this and this person can't. It's really, how did they grow? It's very individually tailored, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's in a competitive industry. You're looking at their unique gifts and
Yeah.
they can blossom within that. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone grows at different times. Someone might be working on something for 3 months and nothing's happening, and then suddenly, boom, huge improvement. It's like almost overnight. And someone might just be gradually improving every day. So everyone, they're individuals, they're unique, and they should be treated as such. And everyone grows differently. We have different backgrounds. We have different things that we carry with us, and we can't get away from that.
Yeah, I always thought it was a really interesting thing to go to college during those years in which you're so desperately trying to understand who you are.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that's one of, you know, uh, being able to look back and reflect on, my life. You look at all the things that are going on between ages, whatever, 12 to 22. And, there's so much change happening. And now you're learning a craft, it's so intensively with such rigorous demands.
Right. That requires a lot of vulnerability, I feel like, if you're going to do it authentically and
Yeah.
express it that way.
Yeah, you're asking from these young people such incredible maturity beyond their years, to have that level of discipline and self-awareness.
Yes. I kind of want to talk about live performance for a minute, if that's okay. Um,
Of course.
because An audience also has an energy that adds to the mix of what is happening
Mm.
on stage and for the performer that the performer feeds off of. And so, what are your thoughts on the effect of an audience on a performance?
Ah, yes, that's always, that's always an interesting topic to tackle, right? Because as a performer, you can walk on stage with a certain level of energy and expectation. And then you go out there and then maybe you're not getting any feedback from the audience. You don't feel, that they are with you in that moment, and vice versa. Sometimes you're like, maybe you're feeling low energy and you walk on out on stage and there's huge energy from the audience. So I think there's a great interplay between the two. um, as professionals, it doesn't matter what we're feeling from the audience. We still want to do our best and project and maintain the integrity of everything that we're doing on stage, and really pursue our own artistic interpretations in that moment. So I think the audience plays a huge part when you're um, in live theater. In live theater, it's harder on film, of course, because you don't have that feedback. But in live theater, think about comics, right? If you're a stand-up comic, what does that look like for them, right? If you have a terrible audience or a great audience, can make or break your show.
Yes. How does one continuously show up, whether or not the audience is there with them? Whether it's a good review or a bad review, like what is that thing that keeps someone going?
Well, I go back to the process and being a professional. I had a director who I was in my 20s. Um, really, really wonderful director, and he always talked about, we always have to be professional, be very professional in your rehearsals and classes and everything. And at the time, I just kind of like didn't really understand what he meant. I mean, I understood the words he was saying, but it didn't really hit home until later, until I, had a little bit more maturity. And so I think that's where you're talking about. You have to show up professionally to every performance, and pretty much, every rehearsal, every class, everything that you're doing in your life. Be a professional when you're in that sphere. And so that just there goes. We're going back to discipline. That's the discipline of understanding that this is what you're doing. This is the commitment it takes in order to be successful, or even maybe not even successful, or to do the job at a level that is adequate for your job. Obviously, we always want to, as artists, we're always trying to achieve perfection or the best possible product that we can put out there.
Yeah. A craft that is so personal to expression, like authentic expression. How does one digest like critiques? Because it's the
Ah,
your authentic self expressing. Do you have any advice for people who along that line of thinking?
yes, I think when we're talking about critiques, you can go a number of ways. You could think about like reviews, good reviews, bad reviews. I'll talk about that for a minute. So they're always tough. It takes a minute. So you have to make an agreement with yourself that if you're going to accept the good reviews, you have to accept the bad reviews, and vice versa. And so it's basically like that doesn't really impact what it doesn't impact how you're going to show up every day to pursue your craft and your art. If you want to be an an artist, then you have to have that vulnerability to be able to find that authentic expression for yourself. So it doesn't matter. Some people are going to enjoy that. Some people are not going to enjoy that. So you really have to, build up a tougher skin around that, because it's just the nature of being human, right? Some people are going to agree with you, some people are not going to agree with you. And how do we come to that discussion and that dialogue and maintain ourselves and not be so maybe defensive about whatever that might be if it's negative, right? Because again, if we're getting compliments, if we buy into the compliments, then we also have to buy into the other side of the equation, which is maybe the negative comments that might come your way.
I think that this kind of also aligns with understanding the value of art in the first place, which I'm curious about your view on this because you've been in this since you were a kid and it's been in your family. And so it is really significant to you in your life. And through the years that you've been in it, What are your views on the value of art in our culture and the importance of it?
Yeah, I mean, what is life if we don't have art in it, right? Where is color? Where is design? Where is, live theater? Where's all these things that really info architecture? What if we do not have that in our lives, then what's the purpose of living? Just going to work every day and whatever. You could be in a factory, and that's no disparagement on factory workers, right? So you're just doing something very automatically, but we naturally want to be expressive beings. We want to express ourselves, and so the arts are a means to do that. And whatever that medium is, and that could be through photography with your iPhone. That could be just from drawing or writing or poetry or dancing or any number of ways you can look at that. Any kind of design, architecture, all those things inform how do we express ourselves? How do we engage in the world authentically and creatively? Because you're really talking about that creative element within ourselves that is so innate in every person. And it doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a lawyer or engineer, there's so much creativity within those fields as how do you approach each of those crafts, um, and bring your own sense of self to it.
How how has ballet stayed relevant within the mix of everything? Because it seems like it's a special art form that
Hmm.
certain people connect with. How has it stayed relevant with like social media and all of these other things like coming into the mix of live performance? And what does the audience look like now?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big challenges we have with performing arts in general. I mean, ballet is certainly, considered. It has this moniker of being like very elitist because, and I think a lot of that is for any number of reasons. You can think of from the training standpoint. I mean, lessons are no more expensive than anything else, but they might not be readily available to lots of different populations of people. So you have that as maybe a barrier to entry. There's cultural issues in terms of ballet that might not be part of a cultural value, right? Certain people might value it more than others. So you have that. And then of course you have consuming it, and by that I mean being an audience member to the ballet. Going to the ballet or the arts or live performance, there's an economic impact of that. It might be inaccessible. So in terms of staying relevant, how does dance and ballet stay relevant? We really have to continue to find ways to break down those barriers, and create more opportunity for every person. Certainly, there are now dance classes for differently abled people and differently abled bodies, so that they can also experience dance training in some respect that is appropriate to wherever they are, physically. So in terms of the broader, ballet in general, how does it stay relevant? Um, we have social media, and obviously there's so many dancers who are so active on social media. There's lots of clips of ballet companies and artists and choreographers. They put their work online. So I think because of that, we have more, we see it more. It's more visible. And you have shows like Dancing with the Stars, for instance, and any number of other shows like that people are like they're so invested in dance because of those shows. So I think how do we make it relevant? We have to make it accessible to everybody, as many people as possible. And there's always going to be some barriers there. But you try to build those pathways and build those pipelines to allow people to engage with the art form.
Yeah, and seeing one of those videos on social media might be a spark for someone to become interested. That might
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
mean, most people, well, not most people, but a lot of people, their first experience with ballet, with live ballet, is the Nutcracker, right? During the holidays. And that is so important. That production is so important. Um, from the standpoint of, it's really geared towards children, but obviously adults enjoy it as much or could enjoy it as much. But for a lot of children, it's their first time with live theater. First time might be first time in a big theater. It might be their first time with live music, first time seeing dance live. So it's all these things in this one production that maybe give them a different worldview just by seeing this one performance. We're so inundated with streaming content now, which I love, and I certainly I certainly consume enough myself. But there's nothing like being in a live performance.
Well, live performance, yeah, there's something very magical about live performance. I remember my first experiences with that. I think that we always remember those experiences that initiate us into the live theater world.
Yeah, there's nothing like seeing someone do something absolutely incredible on stage. Just that seems to defy expectations. Obviously, I see that with dance and ballet, but the easy one to think about is something like Cirque du Soleil, right? If you've ever seen Cirque live, it's absolutely incredible to be up close and personal with those artists as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of my best friends are in Cirque du Soleil, actually, so I have had the privilege of doing that. And it's really also very much about storytelling. And that's how we kind of understand our human existence. And I feel like dance is a really big part of that as well.
Absolutely. We are all storytellers in our own ways, and it is such an important skill for us to all have, whether we're crafting our own interpretation of a role, or we are creating proposals for a grant or for whatever business project. We all have to tell our stories, right? If you're trying to raise funds, you have to be a good storyteller. People need to really understand what it is that you're proposing, and you have to really engage them. So we all are storytellers and need to perfect our storytelling skills.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're holding a very wonderful container for your students to feel comfortable enough to tell their stories. So that's really great.
Well, thank you. I try. I really try to create that environment where they do feel comfortable. But I also, what's really informed what I do as a teaching artist is the things that were missing from my training and my development as a young artist. Like, okay, these are the things that would have really helped me. So I try to now impart those things or be those things that were not present for me as I was moving through my career.
Oh, yeah, I think that's the most important implementation that could ever be done. So, is there anything that we haven't covered that is on the top of your mind or your heart that you would like to share?
No, we've covered quite a bit. We've covered a lot. There's certainly ideas of like mentorship. We've kind of touched on the mentorship of young dancers, but we've gotten deeply into like even interpretation of roles and all of that.
Yeah, great. So, I ask one last question to wrap up, and that is if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
Hmm. My inner voice had a billboard. I think I always think about this every day is um, to be grateful and to not be afraid to be a novice at something in your life, to go into an activity that maybe challenges you in a way. And it's really hard to be feel that vulnerable when you become uh, uh, an amateur at something. But I think there's so much growth and opportunity there.
The thing that I love about the word amateur is that, like, the etymology of that word means from the heart. And there's something to be said
Oh,
about someone who is willing to do something just because of the love of it.
yeah, it's hard as an adult to be a beginner in anything. We have so many ideas about ourselves that we've built up, and then to be a beginner, suddenly that breaks down, that breaks those things down in a hurry. You have to come to those things with humility.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom. I enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Whitney, and it's been great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay tuned in to you.